The following is a listener-supported ministry from the Grace Evangelical Society.
Today on Grace in Focus, a centurion contemplates Christ. In Mark 15, we hear from this man at the cross who has just experienced Christ's last breath. He utters a real-time eulogy that is the last known statement at the scene of Christ's execution. Thank you for joining us today. Grace in Focus is the radio broadcast and podcast ministry of the Grace Evangelical Society. We are located in North Texas, and we have a website, faithalone.org. That's faithalone.org. There you can find our resources, including Bob's latest book, The Gospel is Still Under Siege. Look for it in our store. And that address again is faithalone.org. Now with today's discussion, here are Bob Wilkin and Ken Yates.
Having a really good time going through the Gospel of Mark, and we're coming to the end of it.
It has been so encouraging, and I'm looking forward to this. We're in chapter 15, right?
Right.
What are we doing? A centurion
At the
contemplates...
cross.
Oh, this makes another C. A centurion at the cross contemplates Christ. And didn't you write your dissertation at Dallas Seminary about centurions at the cross or something like that?
Well, I did it on centurions, but I did it in Luke's writings, centurions in Luke and Acts. But when I talk about the centurion at the cross in Luke, obviously I discuss what happens here in Mark as well, the differences, which we're going to discuss here, what the centurion says in Luke and what he says in Mark and what that means.
Now, a centurion, as the name sounds, was over 100 or more men approximately?
Yes, but it wasn't 100. You know, most people would say, well, he would have been over like 60 or something.
60.
Yes.
And how does that compare to the United States Army? I mean, what's a captain, what's a major, what's a colonel? How many are they over?
Yeah, that's a good question. If we're going to make a comparison, probably the centurion would be similar to a captain in the Army.
Okay.
You know, and how many he would command. Like when I was in the Army, a company which was commanded by a captain might have 100 people in it.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more. But there were companies that were smaller too. So, yeah, that's pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah. But they were very well-respected men.
The centurion.
A centurion was.
And they were fairly well educated?
Yes, they had to. A lot of positions, like a tribune that you read about,
Yeah.
those guys could get it through nepotism or through what family you were in or something like that.
Right.
But a centurion is someone who worked his way up the ranks. And when you look at them in the Gospels, they're, particularly in Luke's writings, they're always in good light. I mean, Luke evidently was impressed with centurions.
Yeah.
You know, and this guy here in Mark, for Mark, he makes a very dramatic statement at the cross.
Now, we're just looking at two verses on what he says in Mark 15, 38 and 39, right?
Right.
So if you have your Bibles, unless you're driving, turn to Mark 15, 38 and 39. And this also has the veil of the temple, and I know you have an unusual view there.
Right.
Yeah, you want to read this?
Yeah, so in Mark 15, 38 through 39, it says, this is when Jesus died. Jesus dies in verse 37. And then it says, then the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And so when the centurion who stood opposite him saw that he cried out like this and breathed his last, he said, truly this man was the Son of God. And this is the final statement at the cross.
Wow.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the final statement at the cross is made by this Gentile army guy. And if you've been following in these episodes in Mark that Bob and I have been going through, we've talked about the fact that the nation of Israel is under judgment. Because right here they just killed the king.
Right.
He's come and he's offered the kingdom. He's demonstrated
and
that he was...
And they've rejected him and the kingdom.
That's right. And everything's gone. And I argue that the darkness at the cross was a sign of that judgment. The judgment is falling upon the nation. And the fact that this guy, who's a Gentile, sees what the nation does not see is obviously a strong rebuke to the nation.
Wow.
You know, it's obvious for this guy, but you religious leaders have rejected him.
Okay, now I've got something I know from your doctoral work. You did a doctorate in New Testament, and I know you were in a class and you were discussing the centurion at the cross, or some people say they were two different centurions. In one gospel, in this gospel, truly this was the Son of God. In the other gospel, is that Luke, where he says, truly this was a righteous man?
Or an innocent, right.
An innocent man?
Yeah, he didn't deserve this.
Okay.
Right.
And when you were in the doctoral program, weren't the students and the professor discussing which one of those things the centurion actually said?
Yeah, that came up in class, and the prof said, well, he said one of them, and the other guy just changed it to his purposes.
The other gospel writer.
Yeah, like let's say, for example, that Luke got it right. That Luke said, Luke accurately recorded that the centurion said, "This is an innocent man or a righteous man." Well, Mark, he had something else he wanted to say, so he changed the words, and I found that very bizarre.
So what did you say in class? Well,
I said, he's there for 3 hours. Did he only say one thing? I mean, if you're somewhere for 3 hours and you see all these things happening.
Well, 6 total, but
sure.
3 since the darkness.
Right, yeah. And so you see the darkness, the earthquake, you see him die this way.
Might he say, it's not like one of the things was positive and one was negative. They're both positive.
Right. And I mean, if you've been around, like I've been in the military where we're sitting around something, and if something happens, if I'm there for 3 or 6 hours, I'm going to say all kinds of things. So why couldn't the centurion have said, this man is innocent?
And you brought that up.
Yes.
And what did the professor say?
He says, well, no, you're just wanting your cake and eat it too.
And if you want to say that, we really don't have anything to discuss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. His view was that you could still have inspiration even if it's not what he said.
Even if it's changing things.
Right. The gist of it is all that matters.
Although to say truly this was an innocent man is not quite the same as saying truly this was the Son of God.
Exactly.
We will rejoin in just a moment, but years ago, Zane Hodges wrote The Gospel Under Siege. Sadly, this is still true, and GES President Bob Wilkin has recently written its sequel. Bob's new book, The Gospel is Still Under Siege, is a book about theological clarity on the biblical teaching about eternal salvation. It is available now. Secure yours today at the Grace Evangelical Society's bookstore. Find it at faithalone.org/store. That's faithalone.org/store. Now back to today's content.
And by the way, you don't take the view that Son of God there literally means this guy now is a monotheist and he believes Jesus is the Messiah, etc. You take this more the view that he's probably still a polytheist and is saying he's the son of the gods or something?
Yes.
Or he's the son of the local God, the God of Israel.
Yes. There's a lot of evidence that the army or soldiers in the Roman forces, particularly as a centurion, he probably would have been to a number of places. And they were very superstitious. If you went into a place, you would adopt the practices. You would bring in the beliefs of that local god. They would believe that a local god had
local power.
Local power.
So he could save you from in the valley or in the mountains or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they believe that regarding the God of Israel too.
That's exactly right. And keep in mind, Jesus dies near the temple of the God of Israel. And he sees the darkness fall upon the lands. What he's thinking is, I'm sure of this, the God of Israel, the gods that these guys worship, he's displeased with what's going on. And therefore he says, this guy was innocent and their God is mad at what they've done to him.
Yes.
And so here's another rebuke to the nation of Israel, right? That here's the religious leaders who are around the cross, who are blaspheming him while he's hanging on the cross.
Right.
And the centurion sees all this. And he says, you people are crazy.
Wow.
You just crucified an innocent man, which is the statement against Israel, right?
That's a good point.
And when he says the Son of God, they called the Caesar the Son of God.
Uh-huh.
That he was their God, so he would
each of the Caesars claimed divinity.
Yes, even on the coins, and
right.
and so What the centurion was saying is, this guy is a Jew, and their God is angry with the nation at what they've done to him. And he is one who is doing his work. He is the Son of God, just as Caesar was a son of the gods and was therefore God's representative on earth. He was doing God's work upon earth. And that's what the centurion is saying. What he's saying is, this guy, this one here, I've seen the way he died. I see what's happening to him up here, and all the stuff that's going on the cross, including the darkness. He would have interpreted it that way.
Would you say then that this guy, like Jesus said, this one's not far from the kingdom, that he might now become open as time goes on to
or sure.
believe in Jesus for everlasting life, and not as one of the gods, but as God?
Yeah, we don't know what happened to him. He was certainly open to it. And I would also say that in the Gospel of Mark, he is the only person who calls Jesus the Son of God.
Really?
Only one.
Okay, one other question. Normal understanding, and I'm sure you all have heard this, is that the temple is torn from top to bottom to indicate that it comes from the top to the bottom because God is the one who does it, and God has now opened access to the Holy of Holies.
Book of Hebrews.
And this is the veil in front of the Holy of Holies. But that is not your view, is it, Ken?
No, I would say that there's an outer veil, and I think this is the thing that is ripped. And I think
why?
Because it is Jesus is told that the temple is going to be destroyed, the judgment is coming upon the nation, and with the tearing of that outward temple, that's the sign.
Outward veil.
The outward veil. That here is judgment upon the nation. The darkness represents that, and that fits with one of the two major themes in the Gospel of Mark. That this generation of Jews has rejected the kingdom, and judgment is about to fall upon it.
The other is still true.
Sure, it's true.
The way is open, and the book of Hebrews does say that, of course.
Right.
So whether this says that or not is not the point. But I do like your point that the cross was ultimately a judgment upon the nation.
And I think the centurion's statement is a judgment upon the nation, a rebuke to them. That this Gentile pagan sees what they don't see. Again, we hope this is helpful to you. And remember, keep grace in focus.
We would love to know where you are when you are listening to us. Please take a short minute to send us the call letters of this station and the city where you are listening and how many times a week you listen. Thank you. You will be helping us with our stewardship. Send it to radio@faithalone.org. That's radio@faithalone.org. We are so thankful for our financial partners who keep us on the air. Every gift is tax deductible and very much appreciated. If you'd like to find out how you can give, go to faithalone.org. On our website, we have a church tracker. It's an easy-to-use map that will help you locate those other Free Grace churches that might be in your area. So come visit us at the website and take advantage of our free church tracker. It's at faithalone.org. That's faithalone.org. On our next episode, was part of Mark's Gospel lost? Please join us for that. And until then, let's keep grace in focus.
The proceeding has been a listener-supported ministry from the Grace Evangelical Society.